folks. Welcome to another Toy Guys Talking. Very happy to be talking to Sean Fewster, my good brother from Australia. Once again, you are one of the Unicron Unity, and thank you for that so much. I'm so excited about that.
You're very welcome.
And today we're going to be talking about the Star Wars. We've been chatting a little bit in the Patreon messages about Headcanon and what's up with this whole but it's canon. But this is canon, and we have to follow it, and it counts. And we were just chatting a little bit, so we decided, like, why not just kind of open this up for other people to join in the discussion, and just to remind people that it's okay to come up with your own headcanon. You don't have to leave it up to some famous producer or writer or corporation to say, no, that doesn't count. Like when they wiped out the entire expanded universe and said, now it's Legends, or whatever they call it. So yeah, that was just a lot of fun. And my personal stance is the sequel trilogy is not my cup of tea, because this is my cup of tea. The Zan trilogy, those novels that came out in the 90s, those are my headcanon. Like, whenever my mind goes to whatever became of Luke, Han, and Leia, it goes right to that. And it's so amazing that now in 2019, we've got the new audiobook with the sound effects and the music, and the comic adaptions were made years ago. But what's your personal headcanon?
Well, it's interesting because I came into Star Wars, I think, earlier than you did by the sounds of things. I think you've said in some of your videos that Star Wars was a later thing for you. Yeah, you sort of got into it in the late adolescence, early teenage years.
Well, the weird thing is I watched Droids and Ewoks when I was a kid. That was my Star Wars, and I'm sure most people are like, no, please, no. Like the Michael Scott thing, right? No, please, God, no. Don't let that be his intro to Star Wars. But yeah, that was my Star Wars until the 90s, where I hunkered down and said, it's time to binge. We didn't use that word, but that's what I did.
So I've never known a time in my life without Star Wars. I'm 40 years old this year, born in 79. I remember getting into Transformers. I remember discovering G.I. Joe. I remember where all my other pop culture obsessions came from. But Star Wars was baked into me, and I really don't know why. There's never a time in my life that I can remember not being into Star Wars. And one of the reasons for it is actually, strangely, this.
Splinter of the Mind's Eye, Alan Dean Foster, the first sequel.
That's right. And this is the first edition of that book.
Oh, cool.
So this book is actually from 1978. Yep, 1978. There you go. So it's the 1978.
What are you doing opening it? You're creasing the cover.
What are you talking about?
Oh,
what do you mean?
no.
And this book lived in my house before I could read. So like I said, I was born in 79. My parents aren't big sci-fi fans. And I've said to them, why did you have this book? And they're like, we don't know. So there's never been a point in my time where there hasn't been a Star Wars novel in my immediate vicinity, this particular Star Wars novel. There's never been a time where I haven't had Star Wars action figures, toys, whatever. So it was baked in. And literally one of my earliest memories is sitting down in a leather beanbag in my parents' still so 70s living room with my Fred Flintstone bottle, watching the tape recording of Star Wars, the 77 film, on Betamax tape, taped off of television.
Wow.
So it's baked into my DNA. So when, the dark times came and the films ended and Ewoks and Droids finished. Droids, by the way, is the bomb. I love Droids.
The original. So how about like the original one versus I fixed it for the DVD release? They took out Trouble Again. How do you take out Trouble Again? And they re-edited it to make it make sense.
No, love that show. So during the dark times, I was still into Star Wars, but it was one of those things where it was like, oh yeah, that's something I like. And then this monster came out.
Yes.
And
all of the hype that people...
This man took us for a trip.
Yes. Timothy Zahn.
And like you, I just absolutely fell in love with this. And I remember vividly like haunting bookstores to find this.
Yeah.
And I remember the interminable wait for this.
Yes.
So I really deeply got into all this stuff, and I was in high school by that point. I was in, I think, grade 9, grade 10, and I started doing book reports on them and things like that. So it made logical sense to me that Star Wars would have a series of films and then go into novels, because that's what Star Trek did. That's what so many other franchises did. So this became my canon. And I fell out with the EU around the time of the Yuuzhan Vong, because I'm like, lizard people from beyond known space whose armor is lightsaber resistant. No, I'm good, thanks, guys.
Yeah.
And Star Wars just sort of faded into the background again for me until the sequel trilogy came out. Now, one of the things that fascinates me about this discussion is I love the sequel trilogy a lot. It is a completely different spin on things. But I think there's a logical reason for that, or at least this old brain of mine's created a logical reason for it. So let's talk headcanon. You know this, but the viewers don't know this. So my headcanon is that there are 2 versions of Star Wars, the saga. The first version starts with New Hope, goes to Empire, goes to Jedi, includes all this good stuff.
Even Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
Especially Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Especially Splinter of the Mind's Eye.
See, it can be done, folks, even though you could say some stuff in that contradicts or...
That's right. It includes the Marvel comics from the 70s and 80s. It includes the Dark Horse comics, and it includes all the books up to 1998.
Now that's tricky.
All the EU books.
It's tricky because when the Zan trilogy came out, and I love that you took your time showing them off, because you just reminded me why it's so powerful and special to me. Some people might be going like, the books, who cares, right? Because the trailers are so important, and going to the theater is so important. But you just reminded me, the first book came out, and I was like... Huh? What is this? Read it, blown away, and then what? We get to do this again? And the second book came out, and read it, and loved it, and then, what? There's a third one? This is a trilogy? Like the trilogy? That's why it was so powerful, because it was like the original trilogy, where it wasn't just you go, you watch it, you love it, you see it a few times over a few weeks, and then poof, it's gone out of your mind. 3 years later, here's another one, Empire. 3 years later, here's Jedi. That's what they did to us with the books, and that's why it's so hard for me to let go of them, especially when the alternative is what we're getting. And I'm like, for me, there's no comparison.
Yeah, and see, this is where headcanon comes in, because like I say, I include all the books in my first canon up to 98.
Oh, I wanted to ask you, sorry, before I forget. So my whole point was, I love the Zen book so much, and I was reading Dark Empire by Dark Horse, and I was trying to make it fit, and I couldn't, because I was like, these don't seem to mesh. How do you make a
story about that? The famous story is that Zahn was told, oh, by the way, we're doing these comic books, you need to reflect the events in your books. And he went, no, I don't.
Right.
Oh, but no, I don't need to do that. Oh, but we want to set the comics before your books. He said, no, you can't. Oh, okay, Mr. Zahn, we're very sorry. We'll set it afterwards. So it goes after.
So he had his own headcanon. Oh, it goes after. Okay.
Yeah, it goes after.
That makes it much easier then.
Yeah, that's my understanding. It was designed to go earlier, and then they had to white out or liquid paper out a couple of caption boxes to set it a bit further down the track.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I count everything in my headcanon for original Star Wars up to 98. Any books published after 98, of course, take the events of the prequels into account. Mm-hmm. I don't like the prequels. It's as simple as that.
It happens. It happened to me.
So as far as I'm concerned, that's where the second version of Star Wars starts. If this is a Star Wars multiverse, here's our second multiverse.
Yeah.
And that multiverse obviously starts with Phantom Menace, includes Knights of the Old Republic, things like that if you want to, all that stuff, and stretches through as much of the Disney canon as is prepared to... Sorry, stretches through until the Disney canon. This is version 2 here, because you've then got a whole bunch of EU books that try to retrofit the events of this so that they match the prequels and things like that. So that's version 2.
Yeah.
Then Disney takes over. Disney says, nope, okay, no EU, we're starting again. So now we're on version 3 of the universe. And version 3 of the universe has some stuff I like, like Rebels, like the sequel trilogy.
Yes.
Some stuff I don't, like Clone Wars, like the prequels, like Rogue One. Boy, I really don't like Rogue One. And it is what it is. Now,
it happens. It didn't happen to me, but it happens.
It happens. The reason that I can make all these work differently is something that Zahn actually set up. So Zahn says in these books that Luke has been trying to find bits and pieces of Jedi culture.
Mm-hmm.
This version of Luke, EU Luke, first EU Luke, Gen 1 Luke, never finds those bits and pieces beyond scraps. And so he builds a brand new Jedi Order where Jedis can get married and, do healthy things with their emotions.
Yeah.
Disney Luke, and to an extent, second EU Luke, we'll call him Legends Luke.
Or
he
Luke?
has the misfortune of...
What about Jake? Jake?
Jake.
Mark calls him Jake.
He has the misfortune of discovering the actual truth of the Jedi, the poor boy. Yeah. And how, terribly repressed and really, really wrong they were about things. And so you're going to get a Luke that isn't heroic, daring-do, space adventure, swashbuckler Luke, making it up as he goes along, taking the best bits of the past and merging them with the future. Mm-hmm. You get, I'm doing this wrong. I need to be slavishly devoted to this. Please leave me alone in a tree with some books until a girl comes and snaps me out of it.
Yeah.
Or, Disney Luke. So because of that dichotomy between the undiscovered past of the Jedi and the discovered past of the Jedi, to me, that's your multiversal split-off point. Like Transformers the movie is the multiversal split-off point in G1. There's a version where Galvatron goes back in time and stays back, and that's the UK comics. There's a version where he stays, and that's the third season of the animated series. Mm-hmm. That's your split point. So for me, this trilogy is really the split point. Do you get healthy Luke, who's an adventurer, or do you get depressed Luke, who really has to find out that his father did say things like, I hate sand? No wonder we get Disney depressed Luke at the end of the sequels, because, that poor boy's been confronted with some stuff that nobody should have to watch.
Yeah, I think that is fascinating, and that's a wonderful way of looking at it. And luckily, something like Spider-Man Into the Multiverse, Spider-Verse, has come out and been successful, because people could have just pooped all over that and went, this is confusing. What do you mean 2 Spider-Men? What do you mean 4 Spider-Men? But people loved it, and they're more open, because I guess one of the positives that have come out of reboot after reboot after reboot is people are starting to accept different incarnations. So it's not just, what have they done to my Star Wars? It's this is another Star Wars.
Yeah,
and
my Star Wars is right here. You can't touch it. It lives on the shelf next to the computer. You can't alter it. You can't change it. It's here. Yeah. You can't stop it. You can give me something new and I can see whether I like bits and pieces of that.
And include it or not.
If I do, great. If I don't, I've managed to find a way to fit Rebels into this. That's impossible, but I've managed to find a way because I love Rebels. It's great.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to fit perfectly, because the bottom line for all of this stuff is it's supposed to be fun. If you're sitting there and working on a spreadsheet and going, okay, Kanan Jarrus, how do we get him in there in the timeline? You're doing it wrong. Some things don't require all that much thought. They don't require all that much trying to hash it out and make it fit. It just, watch what you love, watch what you enjoy. You haven't had a chance to watch Mandalorian yet, right?
No, we get it next Friday. So whatever, I don't know when that'll be versus when this video airs, but I'm a week away from seeing The Mandalorian at the moment.
Which is so ironic, because Australia is always in the future, and now for once you guys are in the past. But The Mandalorian, I saw a really funny meme picture where there's this little kid holding someone's face. I don't know what movie it's from. Maybe someone can comment and say it's from this movie. Kind of looks like Robin Williams' face, but this little kid is holding this guy's face, and the caption says, "Me," is the little kid looking concerned. And then the face he's holding is smiling, and it says The Mandalorian. And then the final caption, because it's sequential, the little kid is smiling, going, "Oh, there you are, Star Wars." So
it's from Hook.
Hook? Okay.
From Hook, yeah.
Perfect.
There you are, Peter.
There, exactly. So that's how I felt about The Mandalorian, because my wife and I both went into it with kind of one eye shut and cringing and waiting for the wokeness, the modern agendas, and not not the Rebels essence where they just said, forget all this new stuff that has to be included because of social justice. Let's just go back to those original serials that George was inspired by. And that's what we felt The Mandalorian was. We just felt like, oh, we can love Star Wars again. And it's not just, and I've been loving Star Wars by going back to, revisiting and enjoying the original Star Wars, my headcanon. Watching the despecialized edition of the original trilogy, which is so much more powerful. Anyone who grew up like yourself watching those original versions before all of the special editions, if you've watched original trilogy Star Wars over and over and over again, you have no idea what effect, and you haven't seen the unedited, despecialized. You folks have no idea what effect this is going to have on you, because it's not just, oh, that thing is back to original. Oh, that thing is back to original. The whole thing has been color corrected, maybe a little grain added, and just the feel, the atmosphere, every single solitary second is a time machine back to 1977 or 80 or 83. And it really is something special.
Yeah, watching those with our kid recently was amazing because and this is what started this conversation. I bought the despecialized editions and I reached out to you and I said, I've got them. I'm so excited. We're going to show them to the kid. And I decided to try to watch them as what they call the machete order.
Right.
Where you watch Star Wars, you watch Empire, you watch Attack of the Clones, you watch Revenge of the Sith, and then you watch Jedi. So you treat the prequels as an extended flashback sequence off the cliffhanger of, no, I am your father.
Right.
And so we tried to watch it that way because the kid's never seen the prequels. Anytime we've put on Phantom Menace, it's like 5 minutes in, no, not watching this. Sorry, I'm done. Walk away. Oh, okay, kid, no worries. So we watched them through. And the kid's response to the prequels was, well, there's 6 hours of my life I'm never getting back. Thanks so much. So it didn't quite work there. But watching the despecialized editions and seeing the look on the kid's face as just absorbed everything that was happening was wonderful. And the majesty and the power of those original films, it's great. But one of the other things that was fascinating to me was watching some of the docos that are included on the despecialized edition. And there's one narrated by Mark Hamill talking to Lucas. And Lucas says, oh, the reason I did the Jabba's palace sequence in Return of the Jedi is because the cantina scene in the first film didn't work for me. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I decided to remount it. Because as a filmmaker, it's very important that you move forward with your filmmaking and achieve things in your next movie rather than trying to go back and re-edit and change everything you did before. And I went, what happened to you?
Yeah.
Where did this man go?
Yeah.
Show me on the doll who hurt you and where. Like, I can't believe that this is the same guy.
The bills will change a man. Once you start down the bills path, forever will it dominate your destiny.
And bitter divorces.
That too.
It hurts me. It physically hurts me that the reason we can't have original Star Wars on Blu-ray is because he refuses to give his ex-wife money. His ex-wife, who is the reason that that film is successful in the first place.
Yeah.
It just... as you can tell, our differences on woke culture are fairly extreme. But at the same time, it just... it irks me so much that she doesn't get the due recognition she deserves, that she doesn't get the ability to have that film out there and for the world to understand there'd be no trench run tension without her.
I've never heard that that's the reason. It's like, this is the first time I've ever heard that it's because of Marcia, formerly Lucas, holding that up. I've always just heard...
Well, it's not that she's holding it up. It's that under the terms of the divorce, she gets 50% of the profits from the release of that film if it's ever re-released in its original form. Now, 50% of the profit. Imagine how much money Disney would lose if they put out that original film again. Yeah,
I've never heard that before. The only explanation I've ever heard from George was, these are the official ones. So she's not holding it up. It's not her choice, but she is the impediment, whether she wants to be or not. She's like, I've never heard that
through
before.
No fault of her own. She is the impediment. She's deserving of the money from that work, and her ex-husband will not give it to her.
Now, I wasn't there when they were making it, but I've heard a lot of stories, and it's my opinion that she's the one who injected the love and the magic into the movies, because a lot of people say that. They go, this was very dry and clinical. Hi, Jay.
There's the love in my life.
That she's the one that injected all of that warmth and magic. And then, like, if the only thing you have to compare is the original trilogy to the prequel trilogy, something big is missing. The heart is missing, and she's a big piece missing. Gary Kurtz is a big piece missing. Return of the Jedi still worked for the most part without Kurtz, but it's kind of like, well, maybe his essence was still there, even though he didn't really work on that movie. He still had a lot of essence still in it, even though he wasn't, he was fired by that point. So I'm all for Marcia Lucas getting all the credit she deserves, and it really is sad how she's been erased, or they've attempted to seemingly erase her. It does seem the plan was always to continue immediately after Return of the Jedi, but I was just talking with good brother Joseph, another Unicron Unity member, the other day about how that changed because it was the divorce. So he was out of Star Wars, and I guess, with that information, profits would go to Marcia, but also just burnt out. So the divorce is part of it, raising kids on his own. But also I think the cast, this doesn't get talked about a lot, because I think history sort of paints that as being one big party and everyone had a lot of fun. But having shot a few things myself and seen a few shoots and seeing the behavior behind the scenes, the dynamic between directors and actors, and the information is there. It's not like I'm grasping at straws here. I think they couldn't stand each other by the end of the third movie. It's very obvious. It's very open. Ford's feeling towards the movies. He was done like dinner. Carrie Fisher, love her, miss her, but drug problem. No one disputes that. That's tough to work with. Absolutely, positively tough to work with. And, love her. I'm just going to reiterate, I love her and I miss her dearly. And Mark Hamill, the national treasure, the guy that everybody loves, he's so charming and fun. I remember seeing, an interview in 1983. It's on YouTube somewhere, where he's plugging Return of the Jedi. And I was telling Joseph about this. They're asking him, so what's next? What are the next adventures of Luke Skywalker? And Mark goes, bria, bria, bria. That's all, folks. And just the way he said it, I was really shocked, because he's the guy I thought would go, man, whatever George is up for, give me a call. I'm all in. And how he came off there was like, I am out. All right. I have done my contractual obligation. Forget it. Get me out of here. He did not seem at all enthusiastic about ever doing any more of this. And there is again, documented, not grasping at straws here, there is a documented rift that happened between them. And he was welcomed back in, and he jokes now that he's got Lucasfilm tattooed on his butt. But there was a falling out there for a while. So
yeah, absolutely.
You got that really tough divorce, and you've got actors who really, as a director, you need people who are passionate and encouraging you and saying, keep it up. Like, it's fun. Thank you. We're appreciative. And I think what he had was people going, more money, or I'm done.
He wasn't a great director of people. As Carrie says, you can write this shit, George.
That was Harrison.
You can't say it.
That was Harrison.
Harrison. And Carrie has said similar things. She says something in one of the documentaries like, George is a great visual director. It's people he struggles with.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't that give and take. It may have been that Lucas needed certain things from his actors, but Hamill, Ford, and Fisher needed certain things from their director as well.
Yeah, and I think Marcia was that kind of intermediary, the translator, she was that wonderful. She just sounds like that wonderful person who got everybody. She got the bubbly, sparkling, boisterous, charismatic actors, and she got George. She's just that universal translator, the C-3PO that kind of held everything together.
There you go. We all need a 3PO in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, so back to personal canon for a minute. It's actually that wonderful tableau behind you that led me into the realm of personal canon, because Transformers canon, G1 canon, is a mess.
Oh, yeah.
It's an absolute mess. And we've talked before on the channel about how my experience with pop culture was different being in Australia in terms of accessibility to toys and ranges and, programs and stuff like that. So Transformers is what prepared me for Headcanon, because I watched the original first season of the show, and then that was all Australia got for maybe 5-6 years. We didn't get season 2. And I found the UK comics, which were coming out on a fortnightly basis, and I picked them up at a point where it was a Dinobots solo adventure. So I read that and went, this must follow on from the end of Heavy Metal War, where they've chucked Megatron into the lava. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I just connected the two together in my head and kept reading. Now, UK canon shares the US canon, so anybody that knows Transformers knows they do not mesh at all. But there was so little detail that I was able to make them mesh. And then that went into the legendary Target 2006 with Galvatron and Ultra Magnus and everybody coming back from the movie timeline into the present-day timeline, time travel shenanigans, science fiction, everything. I just kept reading from there. You could have knocked me over for a feather as a kid when I found out there was a second season of the cartoon. But what's an Alpha Trion? Who are these people? I don't understand. What's a Vector Sigma? What are you talking about?
Aerial bots.
Yeah, all of that. It's like
Orion Pax.
The aerobots were built on Earth. Orion Pax? There's no Orion Pax. So it was like a moment where I went, I actually like the way I've stapled it together. I'm sticking with that. And to my mind to this day, that's still when somebody asks me the story of the Transformers, that's how it goes in my head, from More Than Meets the Eye through the first season to the UK comic to the movie. And that prepares you to go, I'm going to stick this stuff together however I need to enjoy it. Because it's got to come back to that. It's got to come back to enjoyment.
Yeah, and it's okay. I say it all the time, and I'll keep saying it. All or nothing is going to usually leave you with nothing. And that's the issue I think some people struggle with Headcanon. I can't get it all to fit. You don't have to get it all to fit. Transformers is a fantastic example of that, because when Bob Budiansky, I got his name right. I didn't call him Budiansky.
You've taught me that.
When Bob Budiansky left the Marvel comic and Simon Furman came in, Simon Furman didn't have an all or nothing attitude of, well, we have to make my UK continuity perfectly fit with Bob's continuity. No, Simon went, we'll make some of it fit, because it's multiverse. So there was Zarin, I think his name was, and he introduced a few ideas, the Wreckers, stuff from the UK comic into the Marvel comic where he could, and the stuff that didn't work, like the timeline, the time jumping, and the Galvatron stuff, he just, What a wonderful attitude for a creative type, for a writer, to just go, let's move forward here and write some of the best Transformers comics I've ever read. I still love that whole lead up to issue 75, and then the wrap up down to Transformers Marvel issue 80. Wow, what a send-off. I mean, so many of our favorite 80s properties didn't get a proper send-off. He-Man, G.I. Joe, there was never a final episode, or even, G.I. Joe got the final Marvel comic, but the final issue of the Transformers comic, sad, but satisfying. It just always, it just made the whole experience very satisfying for me.
Absolutely. And then Transformers sequels does the same thing. Like, my headcanon is that Regeneration 1 doesn't exist. I didn't enjoy it, so I don't count it. I like the Generation 2 comic, so I count that. And that is an even more satisfying ending, because that picks up the threads that were left in US number 80 and ties everything off in a really neat bow by the end, but still leaves things open for more adventures too, which, as Furman says, it never ends.
Yeah.
So that experience, I just like, I can apply that to things now. There are certain things like, don't even ask me how I make the mass device fit into Larry Hammer's G.I. Joe comics, because I do. I'm that guy. And that really shouldn't work. But it's fun to do that. It's also satisfying as a collector. One of the things that I discovered in the last sort of 10 years of my collecting is I don't have to buy everything just because it's there. If there is a point where I say, no, this is my end point, there's nothing wrong with getting to that end point of a collection. One of my big other obsessions is Spider-Man. And I despise with every fiber of my being the erasure of Spider-Man's marriage and the Mephisto role in that and all of that. I violently object to all of it. So my Spider-Man collecting ends with the last Tom DeFalco issue, way, way, way back in the mid to late 90s, which then leads into the Spider-Girl comics. And so that's my sequel, and that's where I go. And I looked at all my Spider-Man comics that I had post that Tom DeFalco issue and went, I could actually divest myself of these, get a whole chunk of money to buy things that I actually like, and look at my Spider-Man collection and say, no, that's good, I'm done. And that's what I did. And it was freeing.
Yes.
It's freeing to say, this is my vision of Spider-Man. It starts at Amazing Fantasy 15, goes through to Amazing Spider-Man 440-something, then goes to What If number 105, then goes to all the Spider-Girl series. And I'm good with that.
It's a wonderful mentality for a collector.
Yeah, it's relaxing and it tightens your collection. It's like you with your G.I. Joes. You know, you like certain things after 87, but not everything. And your collection's very satisfying. So then when you get something like Dusty, like you got the other day, this is a moment. I've got Dusty at last.
Yeah.
It just makes the whole process more enjoyable. And again, like we keep circling back to, surely that's got to be the point. If you're not enjoying it, why are you doing it?
Yeah, collect them all leads to anxiety. And if you're collecting them all just for the sake of having them all, and it doesn't actually... If you have something that completes the collection and it means nothing to you, that's not healthy for you. That's going to do you no favors. The best example I can think of with the Joes is after I got all of the 82 to 86 guys, or 83 to 86 guys, and I had some empty shelves in the back of the Joe shelf, and I was like, okay, I've got the space, and they're not expensive. You can get them for pretty cheap, especially if you don't care if they're complete or not. So, oh, cool. They made another Beachhead, and he's wearing a mask like the original Beachhead. So it's not like he's blonde and got a ponytail, and like the second Frostbite I passed. I'm like, Frostbite's got black hair and a black beard. The second Lowlight, I've never even given him a second look because Lowlight's blonde. What are you doing here? But I would see some of those figures like Dusty and go, oh, that is Dusty. That's what Dusty. It gives me the same feeling as the jump from 82 Snake Eyes to 85 Snake Eyes.
Yeah.
Or maybe I'm trying to think. Roadblock. The original Roadblock to the second Roadblock. Yes, that is how he would progress. So I get a bunch of guys here and there, and then there's Pathfinder, who I never cared for when I was little or younger. Never cared for him. Just did not like the look of him. And I've seen him quite a few times at quite a few shows for very cheap. Just even in the past week, I saw him at a toy show, and there he was, complete. Price wasn't awful. And it always goes back to, how does this make me feel? And I could get him, and it would probably complete whatever year he came out. I don't even really keep track after 87, 86, what year anyone came out. But he would complete the collection for maybe that year and maybe for that whole shelf. Pathfinder, don't have him. Don't want him. Put him back. Because I just went, I'm not going to get him just for the sake of completing, because that is a waste of money. And that's just a waste of space too. So he's one of the few Joes that I just have never cared. He's up there with Rapid Fire for me. Just no thanks.
There are so many things in life that we can't control, that are out of our control, no matter how much we wish it were otherwise. And so many of us that are collectors have anxiety issues, control issues, wanting to assert our will in the universe.
What?
Oh, we do. Come on,
maybe,
let's be fair. We're all friends.
Maybe
here.
One or two of them.
We're all friends here. We can control our collections, and controlling your collection doesn't mean I have to have everything, unless that's exactly what you want. If you want everything, more power to you. Go out and get it. If you don't, though, and you say, I really don't like Ray, I really don't like Rogue One, I really don't like G2 Megatron, whatever it is, don't get it. Control your environment and control your happiness by saying, I'm going to ignore Spider-Man selling his marriage to Mephisto, and I'm going to stop my collecting here. I'm going to love every ounce of this book and keep reading it as part of my canon. Like, a great example was the other day, you got yourself the Laser Rod G2 Optimus Prime. beautiful toy, you stuck him in with the Turbo Masters.
Yeah.
And I looked at that as a Transformers fan and went, I've never thought of doing that. That looks amazing. That's totally right.
Yeah.
In my head, the Turbo Masters go with Star Saber.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we're both completely wrong in the sense of when the toys were released versus who links to who and blah, 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 and who cares. It makes you happy to put Optimus there. It makes me happy to put Star Saber there. We're both telling our own stories. That's control in a healthy way.
And I think
this is what I want my collection to look like.
And I think I'd put Star Saber. That's a brilliant idea because he would go great with the whites, like the white parts on Turbo. What's his Thunderclash and the other white little Turbo Master. That's really nicely color coordinated. He's never been in my price range.
I'm very lucky to have him. Very fortunate.
But that G2 Prime is a funny one because I had him years ago in the 2000s. Probably picked him up locally before toy collecting was as big a thing as it is. And I didn't have anything for him to go with really other than a few G1 Transformers. Doesn't work. It does not. They don't go together. He really sticks out like a sore thumb with the other primes. Like I never really liked displaying him with the other primes. He doesn't look like the proper evolution. And he just doesn't go with anything. But then these Turbo Masters, I really like them, but there's always been something missing. That Thunderclash has never looked like the proper leader, like the Shatterpoint, the supernova or the center of the solar system. G1 Prime is of the 84 shelf, absolutely. Of the 86 shelf, love him or hate him, Rodimus Prime. He's the one that everyone revolves around. And maybe if he can't really carry all the weight, then Ultra Magnus is right beside him, and the two of them together kind of almost get to that G1 Optimus Prime level, right?
Couldn't agree more.
That works. And then you go one level up or 1 year later, and then you've got Fortress Maximus is what he is, and then Power Master Prime. There's always that kind of center figure, and I get to Thunderclash and I go, man, that the figure is, I like the truck mode, but the robot mode is just, man, it's lacking, and this needs a proper centerpiece. It almost feels like Rotor Storm is more of a centerpiece, the helicopter guy, than anyone else. But sticking the G2 Prime in there, it's like, after all these years, that Turbo Master collection is now finally complete. Prime was, and for me, always will be, the focal point of any team around him.
And right there, that's Headcanon.
Yeah.
You've made a Headcanon right there. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that because it makes you happy. It looks awesome. It's within your price range. It fits on your shelves. It fits all the criteria that we should be putting on ourselves. Is it fun? Yeah.
So the danger of Headcanon, I feel like we should
absolutely
talk about, the warning of this is my philosophy, my approach is don't get into debates about it. I mean, your headcanon is your headcanon. It's special. It's sacred. Don't argue your religion. You're not going to win. Don't argue things that you're personally really passionately invested in. Don't argue your headcanon. It's yours. It's special to you. We have different headcanons with Star Wars, and the thought has never crossed my mind of trying to convince you of the proper sequence.
Exactly.
It just never pops into my mind. Like, I hear it and I go, wow, that's awesome. And I get ideas sometimes of how to tweak my own headcanon, and you don't hear mine and go, what are you, nuts? Like the people who look at you and go, what are you, nuts? You've just been warned. Those people aren't connecting to you. They're not respecting. They're just not the people you want to be getting into debates with.
That's right. And like I said earlier, if you want to collect everything, do it. More power to you. If you want to hew exactly to canon and that's how you enjoy yourself, first of all, make sure you are actually really enjoying yourself and not just turning yourself into an anxious stew because you feel you have to keep up with canon. But if you are legitimately enjoying it, again, more power to you. That's fantastic. Don't preach to others about what you believe in geek circles. Don't try to, as you say, convert anybody else to your personal headcanon religion. You and I have had a fantastic discussion that's been going on for like 2 months now about Star Wars because we keep finding out these interesting things and, oh, have you seen this? Oh, do you like that? Back and forth, because it's just Star Wars, guys. That's all it is. Like, it should be fun. If it's not fun, again, why are you doing it?
Yeah, it can be done. We haven't had one argument. We haven't had one fight or even like an uncomfortable or awkward disagreement. It just shouldn't happen among friends. And if that's what's happening when folks are talking about things that they're really passionate about, just take a second, because I'm always reminding myself or being aware of, hey, you're not my friend. You know, when I get into these types of disagreements, and I don't waste the time, because time is precious, and my precious time is used for my friends, for my loved ones. I don't waste it on people who aren't my friends. So yeah, I hear so many people, I got in a fight, I got in a Twitter war or a Facebook war, and I just always think to myself when I hear that, you chose that. You maybe you didn't instigate it, but you fueled it.
Yeah, that's right.
You could have walked away.
And the other thing with headcanon, the other danger is making sure that when you talk to people about it, even in this conciliatory manner, you're respectful for other people's feelings. I made that mistake recently. I was at work. I was talking to one of the other journalists, and they were saying something about the Star Wars films. And I said, yeah, I love those 5 films, being cheeky, because there are 5 films that I, consider to be real. And I thought I was just making a lighthearted joke.
Yeah.
And he got really upset, because he is a person that enjoys all of the films, all of the branding, everything. And he's a complete consumer, an omni-consumer of every variant and version. And he was quite crestfallen that I would take that attitude and speak to him that way. And he wasn't offended, getting up in my face, arguing. He was actually a little crushed. And I realized, oh, that's really sad. I didn't know that I could do that to somebody just by being what I thought was lighthearted. Yeah. So we've sorted it all out, and I apologized, obviously, and everything's fine now. And he said, oh, no, it's not really your fault. It's just that I hear so many people be so negative toward parts of Star Wars that
worn down.
It hurts me.
Yeah,
and
it wasn't you. It was just the defenses were already,
down.
Crumbling.
So if you've got a headcanon that is personal to you and makes you happy, make sure you share that happiness with others, not bludgeon others with it.
Yeah, that's very important. So as it relates to the new trilogy, I don't think I could have made it more clear what I think of the new trilogy, and with episode 9 coming out, I'm not going to see it, and who knows what the future holds. Stars might align. But I said back then, and I still feel the same way today, that the Last Jedi was a nice goodbye. It was I didn't hate it. I don't think I absolutely loved it. I haven't watched it again since I watched it with Luana. So I've seen The Last Jedi twice, and I still feel like that was enough. And I didn't hate Luke's goodbye. I wasn't a big fan of what they did with him leading up to his goodbye, but I was seeing too much of the business in that movie. Way too much of the backstage production machinations and fill this and do that and make sure we hit all these points. And that's not what Star Wars is supposed to be. And I don't see any reason why episode 9 would be any different, with quite a large part of that team doing it as well. But how do you feel about episode 9 coming up?
We've got an entire back row of a cinema booked out on opening night. We bought tickets as soon as they were announced down here. I rang Juzzy Cosplay at home and said, you need to get on the horn to everybody. Let's get our tickets now. So yeah, the entire back row, us and all of our friends. I'm really jazzed for it. I'm looking very much forward to seeing where this goes. But I have the luxury of headcanon.
Yeah.
I have the luxury that it doesn't actually matter what happens. And I had to confront that, because I enjoyed Last Jedi a lot. I'm watching it, at the time, I'm enjoying this. This is great. This is great. Okay, I'm not quite sure what you're doing with Luke here, but all right, I'm enjoying this. I'm great. It's great. Oh, the end sequence with him and Kylo, that's really clever.
Yeah.
Oh, but wait, you mean he's not there at all? Wait.
I was going to ask you, have you ever had to on the fly? Not just, there's one thing to be said about this whole series. It's not my cup of tea. This trilogy, no thanks. But this book series, it's a whole other thing to watch a movie and go, love it. These 5 minutes, no thanks. Love it. Like, to be chopping an actual movie and going, this whole movie isn't part of my headcanon.
No, I never chop bits out. I feel that's disrespectful to the creators. And being a creator myself, I wouldn't want someone to do that to my work. So it was more a case of, okay, now Luke's dead. If he hadn't died in Last Jedi, I wouldn't have had the problems that I had with that film. And I had to get over myself and over my personal hang-ups and over my feelings in order to understand what Rian Johnson was trying to do, what the overall plot was trying to do, and what it was trying to get to. It took me, 15, 20 minutes. We had a tram ride home, thankfully, where I just sat there quietly contemplating what I was actually feeling and managed to get out of my own way enough so that I came to enjoying it. Now I watch it again and I really like it the whole way through. I think that it's a case of, well, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happens to that Luke because Luke's fine. He's here. Right. He's got a wife. He's got a kid. He's fine. He's good.
Alternately.
Yeah, so it's the same way that I look at the currently published Spider-Man and go, oh, that's good fun. It's not Peter, but it's good fun. So, yeah, as a result, now that I'm sort of settled into where we're at, I'm really keen to see where this goes and what they do. I'm fascinated to hear, the fact that they're saying we're going to talk about things like the Force, we're going to talk about Palpatine, we're going to talk about all these things. Okay, bring it on. Let's see what you do with it. My biggest problems now with Last Jedi are filmmaking related. I went and saw it with a friend who's also in the pro wrestling industry with me. And he said, that film has so many false finishes, too many falsies, too many kicking out at two. Like, it just keeps kicking out. It's like watching John Cena. The film just keeps kicking out at two.
Dusty finishes.
And when I watch it back, I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's got too many fake climaxes. It's not the best constructed piece of storytelling.
And it ends with a roll-up.
It really does end with a roll-up. That's a really good way of putting it. I've never thought of that before, but yeah, it really does end with a roll. Jessie's cacking herself in the background here. It's just gotten her too. Yeah, it does end with a roll-up. So
not even a roll-up. It's like Flair and Carey in '84 at the David Von Erich. It's a backslide. It ends with a backslide.
So to see JJ come back, and I enjoyed very much Force Awakens. Of the two, I really liked Force Awakens. To see him come back with the sort of plans they want to talk about and where they want to go, to me it's like, yeah, I'm keen to see this. But at the end of the day, if it's not exactly what I want it to be, well, I'll just go over to the bookshelf and pull all these down and read about them again.
Yeah, that's the best strategy. It's not the be-all, end-all. Nothing you read or you watch is the be-all, end-all. Going back to what Simon Furman said, it never ends. It really never ends. So, bad movie, don't worry, there'll be more. And even if it might be a long wait, there already is more. You can go back in time. Now, it's important to always be going forward in time, but part of the real magic of being a collector, a nostalgist, is that you have the freedom to go forward, to go backward. It seems like right now the present isn't always the most pleasant place to be, but always have one eye going forward. But also, it's important to be upbeat and positive, and there's a lot of optimism and positivity behind us. So there's no reason why someone can't walk out of the latest Star Wars movie, the new one, Episode 9, hate it. Like, you can hate it, and you can go and watch something you love and talk about something you love. The hate of The Last Jedi is very, very disappointing to me, and I'm glad we've kind of moved on past that. Mandalorian seems to be really gaining a lot of positivity and love. Helping Star Wars mend some wounds. But just people need to stop using their platform for complaining. We're all very lucky to have these public platforms, because in the old days you had to be quoted in the paper. You had to have a guest spot on the local news. Exactly. And now anyone can just tweet or post something on Facebook or Instagram, and it is a gross misuse of that soapbox, of that platform, to just go on it and constantly whine and complain. Take two fingers, like for anyone who is just always whining and complaining, take two fingers and put it on your neck. Just stop for a second, be quiet, get away from any noise, and listen and feel the beating of your blood flow. You are alive. That makes you a lot luckier than a lot of people. We just had Remembrance Day a couple of days ago, and that pulsing you feel in your neck, a lot of people don't have that anymore. They pay the ultimate price so that you could put fingers on your neck and hear dum-dum, dum-dum, dum-dum. So just take a minute to try to be grateful for the things that you have, instead of, I hate what they did with this, and this guy packed this thing poorly, what a jerk. And even as silly as it sounds, it's a healthy habit. I did that Real Talk not too long ago where I said, look, I don't want to sit here and complain about, some of the vile stuff that I see. So I'm going to actually take this time to read this letter and to read this message and this post, these positive thoughts. And like anything, that first one is going to feel weird and awkward and maybe even fruitless, but it's important to post things like, I had a great breakfast this morning. Woke up and my back wasn't sore. I can walk without a limp today, whatever the issue might be. The sun is shining and I love the feel of the warmth on my face. These are simple things, but they're great habits, and they're a better use of the platform, I think.
One of the things that I constantly say is that the modern world has too much E and not enough E. Too much entitlement, not enough empathy. There are so many people in the world who would love that their biggest problem is a Star Wars film, who would love that their most major hurdle in life is not liking the latest Transformers cartoon, who would give anything to only be worrying about what Spider-Man was doing this week. So many people have things in their life, it's situations personal to them, cultural to them, politically to them, that mean they have far greater things to worry about. And we're sitting here kvetching about pop culture.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the end of the world, guys. Enjoy what you enjoy. Don't spread the toxicity when you don't. The ultimate thing that I would love to see come out of The Mandalorian, out of Disney Plus, out of Rise of Skywalker, out of all of this, is I would love to be able to, for the first time since 1999, call myself a Star Wars fan again. Because since 1999, I have refused to call myself that. I have said I like Star Wars. I'm not a Star Wars fan, because a Star Wars fan now has a certain connotation, a certain meaning, a certain type of persona attached to it. Rightly or wrongly, we've earned that as keepers of this law. We have created this world where the world sees us in this particular way. So I would love to get back to a place where the Star Wars community is positive enough that I can say, I'm a fan of Star Wars, rather than I enjoy those movies.
Yeah.
Because it's just too negative a community to attach myself to right now. We all know what I do for a living. I'm soaked in negativity pretty much 24/7, 5 days a week. That doesn't work mathematically, but that's why I'm a journalist, not a mathematician. I'm soaked in negativity during my work week. I don't need it in my leisure time as well. So just realize that, guys. Like Michael says, take a moment to be still and in yourself. Take a moment to think about others around you and say, it's not that big a deal. Complain about it if you want to, but complain about it at the size that it is, in the context that it belongs in, not as an all stations blast, sound wave versus blaster broadcast echo through the town.
Yeah. Perspective is important. And in the grand scheme of things, disagreements and, not liking what happened in a movie or a comic or a show, in the grand scheme of things, it just doesn't matter. Now, if a person is only into one thing and it's largely negative fandom, it might be impossible for them to believe that it could be any different than that. Certainly, there have been a lot of collectors.
I was in the Green Lantern fandom in the 90s.
I've seen quite a few people who they got into an argument, or a couple of people, a clique ganged up on them online, and they quit. They sold their collection, and it made them lose their love for whatever it was, He-Man or Transformers or whatever. For the people who think that they're all the same, all the fandoms are the same, get into G.I. Joe. I mean, that obviously there's a couple exceptions, but there is no fandom like G.I. Joe. And I had this feeling years before I ever started to publicly share my love of all the different toy lines. But now I can say, like, with all of the people that I've interacted with, I love the He-Man fans, the Transformers fans, love them all. But G.I. Joe fans are just so positive, so, and they might be fans of everything too. It's not like they're just G.I. Joe fans, but it's possible. I mean, that is a community that always gives benefit of the doubt. It's a brotherhood. Maybe it's because G.I. Joe is a brotherhood. It's not just a partnership, like a working relationship, business relationship. It is a brotherhood of soldiers. And in the Army, in the Navy, in the Air Force, you lay your life down for your brother or your sister without a second thought. So I think more than just mythical warriors battling, or giant ancient robots battling together in their own sort of military type of thing, or brothers bickering who live in a sewer, that type of thing. It seems like the G.I. Joe concept really rubbed off on a lot of the fans, and they're like, I have a duty, not just like a preference or a desire. I have a duty to take care of my brothers and my sisters. So yeah, I would just recommend, even if it's not for a long time, you don't even have to spend a cent, but get into the G.I. Joe communities, the message boards, the forums, and just take a look at how positive and healthy a fandom can actually be.
Well, certainly through my interactions with you and Joseph, I've noticed that massively. So that's good to hear. Being disconnected from all of the G.I. Joe-ness down here in Australia, it's been, that's been an eye-opener for me to see the way that works and everything, because it's just not a thing down here. And unfortunately, when you do meet Australian G.I. Joe fans, there can be some elitism in there because, I've actually managed to get this stuff. Look at me. And it's like, oh, really? Come on.
There are those exceptions, obviously, but for the most part, and Action Force and Action Man falls under that as well, and Vintage Joe too. It just seems as though for a brand that was so labeled as being violent because it's based on army toys, I can't think of another toy line that has just created more healthy, positive, optimistic mindset than G.I. Joe, of like, you have a duty and do it. Cope. Deal with it, move forward, yo Joe, or go force, or whatever the battle cry may be. So yeah.
The other one I've noticed that's great at that is the Power Rangers fandom. I've gotten recently into the Power Rangers comics. Power Rangers was after my time. I would make sure I was always home in time to see the Megazord battle and Amy Jo Johnson, because that was exactly where my interest in that went. Give me giant monsters fighting robots and give me that Pink Ranger. Other than that, I don't care. But I got into the comics when Boom Studios started publishing them, and they are some of the best superhero comics on the market. Hands down. They are brilliant, because in the same way that Furman took Transformers and made it hard-edge sci-fi, which is what made me really love Transformers, this is fully leaning into, well, let's treat this as a proper superhero universe with consequence and weight. What happens when you turn the Power Rangers into that without lessening the fun and the colour and the cheesiness of it? Yeah. So through that, I've come to know people that are into the Power Rangers and are big parts of the Power Rangers fandom. They are so uniformly positive, supportive, accepting and open-minded people, because their genre gets refreshed every 12 months.
Yeah.
Every 12 months they get a new cast, a new set of robots, a new theme. And so they're like, oh, I like this one, but I don't particularly like this one. Oh, but this character's great. Oh, you like that character. That's fantastic. And it is so inclusive and open. Oh, you only like the comics. That's cool. Have you tried this show? And because they know, I think, that their entire milieu is, here's a Japanese show that's been retranslated, they are open to different thoughts about it, different opinions. You know, people may argue about the quality of toys or the quality of products, but in terms of their interactions with one another, that very big message of achieve things together as a team, never escalate the fight, always let the power protect you. It's great to see that absolute wave of positivity. You know, here I am, an old bald guy in my 40s. I'm like, oh, I like the comic books and I have a few of the Fisher-Price toys. Oh, have you seen this one? Do you like this? Do you like that? And that's great to see. It's really great to see.
I love to hear that. And that's also an important thing to remember, that, I guess that's the hot topic these days, but toys aren't just for kids. Toys are for everybody, because it's not about the toy. And I think I said this in my first virtual toy museum tour. It's about the characters. It's about the essence and the spirit of it. And I think people who just reduce it down to a hunk of plastic and calling it a toy have missed the spirit of it. I would even go so far as to say maybe the people making some of these regulations maybe aren't very in touch with their own spirituality and the spirituality of the world around them and the other people around them. But yeah, we'll see how that all plays out. I wanted to wrap up here with Luke Skywalker, since we never got to see how Luke's, well, even the whole big three, we never got to see how their story ended in the books. So the Timothy Zahn books, they sort of continued on and they kind of weave here and there. And the Yuuzhan Vong, you said, same for me. It wasn't really my cup of tea. But how do you think that old Luke from those books, how do you think his story wrapped up? Even though we sort of did see, was it in the Legacy books or the comics, he's a ghost 100 years later with Cade Skywalker. Yeah. But they never showed us his end. I think it was important for George to never show us that skewering moment or the starship dropping on someone or someone dying. He didn't want there to be a definitive end to these beloved characters.
He made that very clear, yeah.
So have you ever filled it in yourself?
Yeah, I've always believed that Luke's end is a peaceful one, because his father died through violence, his mentor died through violence, and that Luke got to a point where there was no violence to dig into, whether it be that the universe was at peace or whether he himself as a Jedi Master was so removed from the front lines that, like Yoda, he was, not fighting physically anymore, but backing up Jason and Jaina and Anakin and the Solo kids and their partners and so on and so forth.
I like that you spared Anakin Solo.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And Chewbacca as well.
Chewbacca too, yeah.
That doesn't happen. No. Yeah, I've always believed that Luke's ending was probably fairly similar to Yoda's, except it wasn't alone in a cave in exile because that's where I had to hide. Yeah. I think it was probably in the temple, surrounded by Mara, with Ben, with other family, and Luke's story starts with him being alone in the universe under twin suns. And I get why in Last Jedi his story ends alone in the universe under twin suns as well, because that's a nice dichotomy, and we all love symbolism and dichotomy in our films. But to me, the point of Luke was, here is an orphan who discovers a calling, a purpose, a higher duty, and a family as a result of it. So I think Luke dies in peaceful circumstances, venerated, and like all the Jedi, fade away.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
That's what I've always believed.
That'll be my headcanon too. I don't know when the next time will be where I'll get to talk about this, but I just came up with an end for Han Solo after watching, it's not a spoiler, but something happened in Mandalorian and it made me think maybe this would have been the best end for Han Solo, or certainly better than what we got in The Force Awakens, because I wasn't a fan of how he went out. I felt like he deserved something a lot more, heroic or peaceful or whatever. But because of the backstage deal issues where Harrison was like, I want to die, and it's the only one. You got me for one movie. And I think if I were in that position, I wouldn't be for very long. They'd fire me like everyone else, because I would say, well, then we don't need your services, sir, because we need you for 3. It's funny, the don't be all or nothing guy saying we need you for 3 or you're not here at all. Or 2 even, maybe. I don't know. But it feels like we can't do what we need to do with you in one shot. There's just not enough time. So here's the idea I had. And I keep saying it sucks, but Luana keeps saying it's better than what we got. He dies a week after Return of the Jedi of hibernation sickness poisoning, carbon freezing poisoning.
Yeah.
So he would just, in terms of the sequel trilogy, he would just be mentioned as having died long ago. And that was sad. And you'd have 3PO doing all of the exposition and explaining how, no, there were consequences. You don't get carbon frozen. And again, this is no spoiler. This is just my own theorizing and stuff. I mean, in The Mandalorian, they don't get into this at all. But it's an idea that popped into my head. Carbon freezing seemed to be like a completely out there idea. It wasn't like Boba Fett was like, great, I've done this 1,000 times. He was worried the guy was going to die. So he gets frozen. Turns out to be great for Boba. Deliver him, hang him on a wall. He's there for a year. Is it a year later?
It's never really sort of dealt with, but I think if you follow the EU, then it is like a year-ish.
Or at least several months.
Yeah, absolutely.
So being frozen in carbonite, hanging up there, and the first thing that happens when he comes out is he's blind. So the first thing we're told is there are consequences. He didn't get out scot-free, and there are consequences to being frozen and being in hibernation that long. Now, he gets his sight back, and we think everything is hunky-dory. But I was reminded of an episode of Grey's Anatomy where one of the major cast members is in a plane crash, and they're in really rough shape. And then he's great. He's like bushy-tailed and bright-eyed, and I feel fantastic. And the nurse calls the other doctor over, and she's like, this is like a thing that happens when you have catastrophic damage. You get a second wind, you feel great, and then you die. And he does. The guy just died even though he was, hey, I'm great, I'm ready to do cartwheels. So I thought everything we see of Han Solo after he's released from the carbon in Return of the Jedi is his second wind, and Ford got, in the end, Ford would have gotten what he wanted. He got his heroic death. He got to save the day, help save the galaxy from the Empire, and the last time we see him is basically his swan song, because a day or two later, what's wrong, Han? I don't know. Got to go get checked out. And he starts to, within a couple days, that's it. It turns out that, and that's one thing that really does suck, but I think if, the guy, always wanted this heroic death for Han Solo, and I was thinking, how do you give Han Solo a heroic death? It's really tough. Maybe the best way to do it is that we already did it, and he already got his heroic death at the end of Return of the Jedi, and he died young, he died a hero, and there was no time to, soil, because this is a character who can very easily soil his legacy just because of his past.
Give him 5 minutes.
Yeah, I thought it'd be an interesting idea if the next time we watch The Empire Strikes Back and he's frozen, instead of, oh, he's fine, he gets saved though, he gets frozen, and the feeling is, that was the beginning of the end.
That is fascinating.
How's that for putting a different spin on it?
Absolutely.
It gives it back its original ambiguity. Like, is he going to be okay? That 3-year period waiting for Return of the Jedi to come out.
Yeah. My and I'm going to have to go off screen while I say this for a second to find it. My personal ending for Han is actually built on something in the EU that exists.
Okay.
You ever read this one?
I don't think so. I know of it, though. I remember when it came out.
Tales of the Bounty Hunters, and it's all short stories. And there's a Boba Fett story at the back, which, he's not a clone. He's just a Mariel of the Concord Dawn, the original concept and idea for Boba Fett. And, this is your spoiler warning, everybody. He, post-Jedi, he gets himself out of the Sarlacc pit, because of course that was part of the EU canon.
Yeah.
And he goes after Solo one last time. And he's determined. Boba's dying from the results of his injuries in the Sarlacc pit. And he's on his way out. And it's implied that Han's not doing great either.
Now, that's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's the same thing. Yeah, he got out of the Sarlacc. But when he goes in, he actually did die. In a way, he did.
Yeah. That's right. So he comes out and he goes after Han and ends up chasing him to this backwater planet that Han goes to by himself because he's feeling listless and trapped in the concept of being General Han, the war hero, and he just wants to get back to being a smuggler. So he takes the Falcon and takes on a smuggling job on his own just to feel young again.
Yeah.
And it ends with the two of them drawing a bead on each other in this nowhere planet in the middle of nowhere. And Boba says, "Trust is hard among enemies. Perhaps we should return to the battle. Perhaps, Han Solo, we should let fly and once more let fate decide who will survive, as we did when we were young." And that's where the story ends.
Good stuff.
You get this last iconic moment of Han and Boba staring each other down like gunfighters and no answers.
Wow.
That's my ending for both characters.
Amazing.
Because there's nothing more perfect to me than that idea of, what does the legend say? Oh, Han Solo walked away. Oh, Boba Fett walked away. Oh, neither walked away. Nobody knows. It's just this legend lost in the mists of time.
I think that's amazing. And I think that's my ending for both of them too. Because I've always I've read that short story of how he got out, and I think it's been told multiple times. But I love that better than, oh, he got out. Because it just makes the thing have no consequence. We can't just have characters coming back like Darth Maul is back. He's got new legs. He's fine. If they go to the lengths of killing someone off in a movie, there should be some major consequences. So I guess with Darth Maul, there were. He's got the robotic legs, and he's kind of crazy. It's kind of like Megatron's death did sort of have, or his, being beaten within an inch of his life did have major consequences. And yeah, he's Galvatron, but he's totally different and crazy. There should be something like that. So I think that's perfectly fitting for both of those old gunslingers to just be standing across from each other. And I think in my headcanon, they both shoot at the same time and neither of them miss.
Mm-hmm. Because that dovetails back nicely to Han shot first.
Yeah. Yeah, and Boba doesn't. Boba does not say that before he shoots. Can you believe one more tweak? Oh, here's a parting shot for you. And it's funny that they noticed that right away, and it's all over the place. Like, they changed it again. Who knows what more changes lie ahead? Who knows? But this has been awesome, man. I love talking to you. You're so intelligent, thoughtful, soulful, and it doesn't matter what the topic is. I really enjoy talking to you. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you so much. I'm loving this. I love that we get to do this, whether it be message, whether it be on video, whether it be recorded on video. I just love talking to you. I love meeting people and making friends who are of a similar mindset. And, it's wonderful to have you in my life.
Cool. So folks out there watching or listening along on the podcast, if you want to meet Sean, if you want to chat with him, Star Wars or anything else, hit him up on some of his social media. You've got Twitter.
Yeah, so Twitter, it's at Sean Fewster, SeanFewster. Facebook, it's the same thing, Sean Fewster. And then on Instagram, it's Sean_Fewster, because someone decided to impersonate me for some strange reason. I still can't make any sense of that. But they're the three main places you'll find me. Twitter tends to be work stuff and nerdiness. Facebook tends to be work stuff and wrestling. And then Instagram is pretty much pure nerdiness and wrestling.
Cool. So once again, awesome chatting with you. And folks out there, thanks a lot for listening. If you would like to contribute to the channel, the podcast, head over to patreon.com/MichaelMercy. You can join us for as little as $1. Having a lot of fun there, lots of exclusives, and a lot more chat to come. Sean, thanks again. Big thanks. Good brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you, my brother.
Love you. Everyone out there, take care. As always, Nerdmas Day.
Nerdmas Day.